Dear students, in this class we discuss in brief the type of games. We first consider zero-sum game versus non-zero-sum game. Now, a zero-sum game is one in which the gain of one player comes at the expense of and is exactly equal to the loss of the other player. It is also known as constant sum game. Constant sum game. As an example to zero-sum game, suppose that there are two firms A and B, and suppose that the gain and the loss are calculated in terms of market shares. And also assume that the total market is a constant. So if A increases its market share, B loses its market share, or the increase in market share of A will be exactly equal to the decrease in market share of B. So it is an example of a zero-sum game. When the share of both increases so that the market is not a constant, then it is not a zero-sum game, because it is possible that the share of both will increase. Then what about non-zero-sum game? A game is said to be non-zero-sum if the gain or loss of one firm do not come at the expense of the other firms. If the gain or loss of one firm is not at the expense of the loss of the other firms, it is a case of non-zero-sum game. For example, if A and B increases, so it is also known as non-constant sum game. Non-constant sum game. For example, suppose that both A and B increases advertisement, so that the share of both the firms increases, so that the profit of both increases, not the market share increases. It is an example of a non-zero-sum game. Also, if as a result of advertisements, if the profit of both increases, it is a positive sum game also. It is a positive sum game. And suppose that as a result of aggressive marketing strategy, profit of both decreases, then it becomes a negative sum game. Negative sum game. So one classification is between zero-sum game, also known as constant sum game, and a non-zero-sum game, also known as non-constant sum game. The non-zero game may be positive sum game or a negative sum game. A second classification is cooperative versus non-cooperative game versus non-cooperative. Cooperative versus non-cooperative game. That is another classification of games. Now, in a cooperative game, players negotiate what is known as binding contracts. Binding contracts. Players negotiate binding contracts. So it allows them to take joint action and plan joint strategies. In a non-cooperative game, binding contracts are not possible. That is, negotiation and enforcement of binding contracts are not possible. Not possible. So the distinction between whether a game is cooperative or not depends on whether binding contracts are possible or not. If binding contracts are possible, it is a cooperative game. If binding contracts are not possible, it is a non-cooperative game. As an example of a cooperative game, suppose the bargaining between the buyer and the seller over the price of a rug. Rug is floor mat. Rug, price of a rug, a floor mat. If the cost of the rug is $100 and the buyer value it at $200, cost is $100, the buyer value it at $200, a cooperative solution is possible. That is, any price between 101 and 199. Any price between 101 and 199 maximizes both the consumer surplus and the producer's profit. So, the bargaining over the price of a rug is an example of a cooperative game. And bargaining over the price of a rug is an example of a zero-sum game, constant sum game, because if the price negotiated increases, it will be a gain to the seller at the expense of the buyer and vice versa. So it is an example of a zero-sum game or constant sum game. Another example is, suppose that two firms negotiating a joint investment to develop a new technology. A joint investment to develop a new technology by two firms. If a binding contract is possible between the firms to divide the profit, then cooperative outcome with both the firms' benefits is possible. Both is possible. And negotiating over the joint venture is an example of a non-zero-sum game, non-constant sum game. The reason is that if the venture succeeds, the profit of both will increase. So, joint development, joint investment to develop a new technology. And if two firms can negotiate a contract to divide the profit among them, is an example of a cooperative game. And it is also an example of a non-constant sum game or a non-zero sum game, because if the venture becomes successful, the profit of both will increase. And examples of non-cooperative games, as an example, suppose that two firms set up prices independently, and if there is an independent price setting by two firms, each firm try to capture as much market share as possible by setting a low price, setting a medium price, high price, etc. So for example, one firm starts with some price, the other one charging a little less than the price of the first, etc., as we have seen in the case of the Bertrand model. So it is an example of a non-cooperative game. That is competitive price strategy, independent prices. Another one is the case of bidding. Bidding, participation in what is known as bidding, B-I-D-D-I-N-G, bidding. So those who participate in a bid start with a certain price and another a little more price until what is known as this competitive bidding results in the contract being awarded to the highest bidder. The contract being awarded to the highest bidder, etc. So bidding is an example of non-cooperative game. Non-cooperative game. Independent price setting is an example of non-cooperative game. Joint venture is an example of a cooperative game. A price negotiation between a buyer and a seller is a non-cooperative game. Remember this, the fundamental difference between cooperative versus non-cooperative game is whether contracting possibilities are available or not. Cooperation is possible if binding contracts are possible. Non-cooperation will be the result if binding contracts are not possible. And remember this, in the real world, most of the games we observe are non-cooperative in character. And in game theory, our main concern is how to analyze and how to study the outcomes, the equilibrium, the solution of a non-cooperative game. Now, in the context of non-cooperative games, what is important is your ability to predict a possible reaction from the rival firms. Your decision depends on how well you can predict the reaction from the rival firms. In the case of a price setting game, in the case of a quantity setting game, or in the case of participation in a bidding, etc. But even in simple games, we will commit mistakes. As an example, we consider a game proposed by Martin Schudig. It is how to buy a dollar bill. The game is how to buy a dollar bill. That is how to buy a dollar. Now, the game was set by Martin Schubeck. That is, a dollar bill is auctioned in an unusual way. And the highest bidder receive the dollar in return for the amount bid. And the second highest bidder, he has to hand over the amount bid and he will get nothing. That is, suppose that there are two bidders. $1 is the price. The highest bidder will get $1 in return for the amount bid. The other one has to return the amount bid, but he will get nothing. The question is, how much you will bid, how much amount you will commit for bidding. Let us see what is the problem here. Suppose that you bid 20 cents, your competitor 30 cents. So by paying 30 cents, your competitor will get $1, you will lose 20 cents. So you will increase it to 40, then he will lose, so he will 50, then 60, 70, and in this way. When Martin Schubeck introduced this game among his students, it was observed that the amount of bid went up to $3. That is $3 to buy a $1 bill. $1 bill. Because if your bidding amount is less than your competitors, you will lose the entire money. So that means you misjudge. Your competitor also misjudge. So what is the best way to play this game? The best way to play this game is bid nothing. Bid nothing. If you bid any amount, say 10 cents, your competitor always bids more than that. Then if you do not increase the amount of bid, you will lose money. So that is why the bidding amount increased up to $3, even though it was a game participated by well-educated students. So even in simple situations like this, we will misjudge, we will miscalculate the outcomes. So the point is, in this game, the best is not to bid any amount. Not to bid any amount. So this is another type, cooperative versus non-cooperative. The distinction is whether binding contracts are possible or not. Remember that. If binding contracts are possible, it is cooperative, otherwise it is non-cooperative. And in game theory, our concern is non-cooperative games and not cooperative games.